bet you've heard that one. But what about this one? Not as famous, I know, but it is also from the same mind of one Rod Serling. Okay, the music's not, but the shows that they go to are. That was the theme song for Night Gallery. Now, obviously, The Twilight Zone has endured for over half a century. It's been remade multiple times, adapted into a film, books, comic books, even a theme park ride. It shot Serling into superstardom the way few television writers have. And for good reason. The Twilight Zone is great. It is a stone cold classic, eerie, surprising, poignant, and endlessly terrifying. But what about Night Gallery? The other spine tingling Rod Serling anthology show. Not as successful or remembered, but in my opinion, worth checking out. Where The Twilight Zone veered more sci fi, Night Gallery was straight up horror. The Twilight Zone was more often than not morality plays. Night Gallery just wanted to scare you. The Twilight Zone was in black and white. Night Gallery was in gorgeous color. Twilight Zone ran for 5 seasons, Night Gallery for 3. Twilight Zone had a great hit to miss ratio. Night Gallery did not. Listen, when Night Gallery hit, it hit hard. The trouble was it didn't hit that often. You kind of have to sift through a lot of mediocrity and odd comedy bits to get to the good stuff. But we can't blame the relative failure of Night Gallery completely on Rod Serling. A lot of it we can blame on producer-writer Jack Laird. Oh, the feud between Laird and Serling could make for its own season of that Ryan Murphy show. You know, feud. I mean, Laird was the one who wanted the comedy segments, and I can look at that and think, wow, he ruined the show. He crushed Serling's vision. What a hack. But Jack Laird wasn't just some producer who fancied himself a writer. He legitimately was a writer, and a pretty prolific one, too. He wrote for Ben Casey, Kojak, My Three Sons Have Gun Will Travel, all the way back to The Lone Ranger. So it's not as if he didn't know what he was doing. So I can only assume he had terrible taste in horror. Or at least his tastes clashed with Serling so much that the show ended up quite the mess. But God, the comedy bits were not funny and not why I am watching an anthology horror show. So that crap combined with some genuinely creepy segments made episodes feel disjointed a lot of the times. And then there's season 3, which is almost all near unwatchable crap, but we won't get into that today. Serling ended up feeling burnt out and disillusioned with the show and distanced himself from it as time went on. But today we're covering a season 1 episode when the show was still full of promise. This one's called The House / Certain Shadows on the Wall, and it aired December 30th, 1970. It ran against Hawaii Five-0 on CBS and Dan August on NBC. The first segment is The House, and this is a good time to talk about the art of Night Gallery, which is usually quite good. The paintings for the series proper, so not counting the pilot, were done by a man named Tom Wright. And he worked his ass off. He produced new paintings for each episode, and he worked in multiple styles. He worked as a production illustrator on classics like The Andromeda Strain, Apocalypse Now, Jaws, and Diamonds Are Forever. And he went on to be a television director. He directed episodes of The X-Files, Angel, Alias, Firefly, One Tree Hill, and Supernatural, including the episode of Supernatural Baby, the one that is all shot from inside the Impala. And you know what? If you know Supernatural, you will understand the significance of that episode. The point is, what a cool career. Anyway, The House. The House is based on a short story by French author André Maurois, whatever, in 1931. And when I say a short story, I mean 800 words. It is very, very short. Serling adapted this into this half-hour segment, and apparently he wasn't completely happy with the end product, and I can understand why. It doesn't make much sense, but the vibes carry it in a David Lynch type of a way, you know what I mean? This segment was directed by John Astin. Yes, that John Astin. Gomez Adams, father of Sean Astin. He directed 3 segments for the Night Gallery. This one, A Fear of Spiders and Dark Boy. I quite like A Fear of Spiders, silly special effects aside. Dark Boy, I remember being pretty bored by. Like, I kept waiting for something to happen, but then nothing ever did. And that can be okay. We've established that if the vibes are good, I will forgive a lot. The vibes were not on point in Dark Boy. He wasn't on his game that week, I suppose. Astin also directed for other shows like Operation Petticoat, Chips, and Murder, She Wrote. But before that, he made his directorial debut with his short film Prelude. Prelude was even nominated for Best Short Subject Film at the Oscars. Apparently, Astin said he was the hottest thing in town for a minute there after that came out, which makes me wonder why he didn't direct more. I mean, like, besides other people's shows, like his own projects. And as of this recording, Astin is still with us at age 96. The House stars Joanna Pettit as Elaine Latimer, and I have got such a crush on her. She's not only gorgeous, but she has this kind of raspy voice, and it's very sexy. I'm into it. Pettit is known for some films, notably the first film adaptation of Casino Royale, but she was mainly a television actor. She was in multiple Night Gallery segments. She was on Fantasy Island, The Love Boat, Charlie's Angels, Police Story, etc., etc. She was in TV movies like A Cry in the Wilderness and Pioneer Woman. She retired from acting in the 90s, but she is still with us today. The only other notable character in this segment is Peugeot, played by Paul Richards. He was in movies like Beneath the Planet of the Apes, The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and Kiss Me Deadly. He also worked mostly in television, all the way back to Hopalong Cassidy through Route 66 up to Ironside. But unfortunately, he was only 50 years old when he passed away from cancer. Fun fact about him, he was the first person to shoot Marshall Dillon on Gunsmoke. I've seen exactly 1 episode of Gunsmoke, so that means little to me personally, but good for him, I guess. Let's dive into The House. We start with Mr. Serling approaching a painting in his titular night gallery. He tees us up for our story, and we're off. It's a very cool painting, too. He says that the house is well heated, and yet there's a chill to it. So let's bundle up before we hear our tale. Oh, Mr. Serling. So we open on a very dreamy scene. Our protagonist, Elaine Latimer, is driving down an idyllic road in her red convertible. Everything is happening in slow motion, her long blonde hair slowly blowing in the wind. She's wearing this flowy peach-colored outfit, and she looks so ethereal. We get Elaine telling us in voiceover what's happening. This is a recurring dream she has. She turns off the main road onto a private one. She feels no fear, no anxiety, just a faint feeling that all of this has happened before. She comes up upon a lovely secluded house and she feels serene. She parks in the driveway and gets out. She goes towards the front door, uses the brass knocker, but has no clue what she'll say if someone actually answers. That she's dreamed of this place before? However, no one does answer, so that's a moot point. She gets back into her car, looks up at one of the second floor windows before she drives away again. And just as she is driving off, the front door opens. Now we're in a hospital. Elaine has been recounting all of this to a doctor. She tells him it's the same dream every time. She doesn't remember ever seeing the house in her real life, but she's been having this dream for 10 years now, and she can describe everything to a T. Down to the flowers. It never alters. The doctor changes the subject to her leaving the hospital the next day. She's nervous about it. She has been in the hospital being treated for depression. She says she's not depressed anymore, but she likes the hospital and doesn't want to leave. The doctor suggests that she likes it because she's looked after there. There are no decisions to make, no consequences. And through this whole scene, she is embroidering. This is something that she will do later in the segment. Doc tells her not to worry about the dream. She must have seen the house at some point in her life, and it represents a kind of permanence that she's lacking. She thanks him before leaving his office, and she's either very tall or the doctor is very short. On her way out, a nurse wishes her luck, and when Elaine leaves the scene, an older patient says, "Good riddance. Never liked the woman. She's dreamy, always wafted along like a wood sprite. Never had both feet on the ground." Interesting. Cut to Elaine driving along in her convertible when she recognizes the road she's on. She pulls off the main road onto a private one, passing the pond she described in her dream, on and on until she comes upon the same house. And what I love about this, it really reminds me of the opening of Rebecca, where we're panning through the ruins of Manderley and Mrs. De Winter is narrating. Love it. Anyway, Elaine gets out of the car and approaches the door, but before she can knock, a voice from the shaded trees asks, "May I help you?" She turns and a man just kind of appears out of the shadows. He's a realtor named Mr. Peugeot, and the house has just been put up for sale. In fact, she would be the first to come and look at it. She jumps at the opportunity to go inside. He tells her that the former owners have gone back to London after only owning the place for a few weeks. They go inside, and as he's describing the house, she cuts him off and describes rooms she's never seen in perfect detail. They enter the study, and he's like, "How did you know it looked like this?" She says she doesn't know how to explain it, but she's dreamed about this house. Except in the dream, she never went inside. But as soon as she entered, she knew the whole layout instantly. This does not freak him out nearly as much as it should. But then this whole thing might be a dream. We'll get to that. He tells her that the owners are asking $60,000 fully furnished. She says that's ridiculous. This house is worth 5 times that amount. And he then has to confess that the owners left because they believed the house was haunted. In fact, all of the owners left because they thought the house was haunted. He doesn't buy it. There has never been any death in the house. There's never been any violence in the house. There's never been any crimes in the house. He asked the former owner to describe this apparition, but they were unable to. He says this is all in their head. Someone plants a seed, and then suddenly every noise they hear becomes a ghost. And Pettit is beautifully photographed in this scene. Her face is half in shadow, and she just looks fantastic. She'll take the house and move in that day. Which begs the question, she has $60,000 to just drop? Good for her, I guess. Mr. Peugeot says that she's different from most women who buy houses. Women are usually indecisive and they go and look at the same place a dozen times. But Elaine knows her own mind. She's got resolve and will. Yeah, screw you, Mr. Peugeot. Elaine says resolve and will aren't normally her attributes. He asks her if she's sure she wants the house in spite of the ghost. Yes, in spite of the ghost, or perhaps because of the ghost. Sometime later, Elaine is taking a nap in her new dream home and she has the dream again. Even after moving in, this dream has not stopped. In the real world, or at least the world where she's taking a nap, she hears a knock at the door just as Dream Elaine knocks. So she wakes up still with that embroidery in her lap. She goes down to answer the door, but there's nobody there. She walks down the drive just as Mr. Peugeot pulls up. He says he's come to see how she's enjoying the place. She asks if he was just there before and if he knocked or if he possibly saw another car on the road. He's like, "Nope, it's just me." Anyway, she loves the house, but she does assure him that it is indeed haunted. No, she hasn't seen the ghost, but she knows, nevertheless, that it's haunted. And he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said anything. I planted a seed in your mind, and now you're just a crazy woman." She gets annoyed that he doesn't believe her and dismisses him. She goes back upstairs and we hear Mr. Peugeot drive away. She goes to call her doctor and informs him that she's found her house and that it's haunted. She tells him that the ghost comes with the sunshine. It's a daytime ghost. And while they're talking, we hear a car pull up outside, the door open and shut, and then a knocking. She goes to answer the door and asks that the doctor just hold on a moment. She sets the receiver down. We follow her downstairs, but then we kind of stay focused on the house and the phone receiver while she answers the door. We hear her scream, but we don't see what frightened her. She runs back upstairs, picks up the phone to inform the doctor that she's just met her ghost at the front door. And that ghost was her. Yeah, she's been haunting the house the whole time, and she's very calm about this, like very at peace. I guess because now she knows. I mean, I have more questions than I had originally, but okay. Anyway, she hangs up and goes back to sleep, and then the dream repeats from both Elaine's point of views. The usual one with Elaine in the peach outfit and with the Elaine upstairs. The dream plays out the same, but we see the Elaine upstairs rushing to try and meet herself. But by the time she gets outside, she sees other Elaine driving away in her red car. The end. What does it mean? I don't know. It's creepy, though. Was all of that at the hospital a dream? Was she a ghost at the hospital? I mean, the old lady compared her to a wood sprite, would probably think so. Was the dream a premonition? How did she even die? Or is she dead yet? Is the her that bought the house alive and the her that knocks on the door a ghost from the future? Who knows? I love it though. I told you it's all about the vibes. And now on to our second story. This is Certain Shadows on the Wall. Serling wrote the teleplay for this one as well, and it is also based on an existing short story called Shadows on the Wall by Mary E. Wilkins Freeman. Like with The House, Serling changed some things up here. He omitted a character altogether. The character who dies in this segment, Emma, survives the original story. Jeff Corey took the director's chair for this segment, and like John Astin, Corey was an actor as well as a director. He directed 9 segments for Night Gallery. He also acted in a couple. And I'm familiar with the name because he directed 2 episodes of Alias Smith and Jones. He passed away in 2002 at age 88. This episode boasts quite a cast. We have the legendary Agnes Moorehead as Emma, that meddling mother-in-law from Bewitched, star of the original radio play version of Sorry Wrong Number. She was in both Citizen Kane and The Magnificent Ambersons, and honestly, you can just retire after that. I mean, you're a legend for life. She starred in one of the great Twilight Zone episodes, The Invaders, and oh my gosh, she was in Pollyanna, All That Heaven Allows, Magnificent Obsession, Showboat, I could go on. Obviously, her most important role was in Charlotte's Web, where she played the goose, and she was no flibbity-ibbity-gibbet. What a career. She passed away only a few years after this episode in 1974 at age 73. Then we have Rachel Roberts as sweet sister Rebecca, which is odd for me to see because I know her as that stone-cold bitch Mrs. Appleyard from Picnic at Hanging Rock. She did more than that, obviously. She was in Murder on the Orient Express, When a Stranger Calls, but like the boring parts of When a Stranger Calls, and Saturday Night, Sunday Morning. And at one time, she was married to Rex Harrington. My sympathies for that. Unfortunately, she died by suicide in 1980 at only 53. Next, we have Lewis Hayward as Stephen. He worked in a ton of classic films like And Then There Were None, The House by the River, The Man in the Iron Mask, and Ladies in Retirement. Hayward passed away in 1985 at age 75. And finally, we have Grayson Hall as Anne. Grayson Hall is a very cool name, by the way. She was one of the stars of Dark Shadows. She worked mainly in television, but had some film roles, like in Tennessee Williams' Night of the Iguana and Disney's That Darn Cat. Hall also passed away in 1985, and she was 62. Now we are back in the Night Gallery, and Rod Serling introduces us to our next story. But this painting is kind of forgettable, and we don't even really get as good a look at it as we did the first one. Anyway, this story takes place in a large manor, and an older man is reading to his dying sister Emma. He puts the book down and asks her if she's in pain. She says no more or less than normal. And this makeup on Agnes Moorehead is great. Like, I can hardly look at her. She looks bloodless. She looks like she's dying. She turns down offers of a drink. She says she's just in so much pain. Her brother Stephen gives her some medicine and tells her it will comfort her. It will ease up some of that pain. She asks him how much time she has. He says he's a doctor, not a seer. Damn it, he's a doctor, not a seer. She says she only wants a small, brief funeral with close family and friends. He says whatever she wants, she'll have. She disagrees with that because what she really wants is more life. And this scene is lit so that we can see very prominent silhouetted shadows of both of them. She asks if he will come and read to her the next night. He agrees and leaves her alone. Stephen goes downstairs and meets his other sisters, Rebecca and Anne. Rebecca is very kind and caring, and Stephen and Anne not so much. Anne reminds Stephen that he is a guest in this house, and he says, I grew up here the same as you all did. Emma was left the house, so technically they're all there at her charity. He throws it in their faces that the women have nowhere else to go, whereas he left a lucrative medical practice to come back and take care of Emma. Anne pushes back against this and says that he left that practice because it failed and he was flat broke. He then complains that he's upstairs 8 hours a day reading Charles Dickens to Emma. Rebecca just wants everyone to stop arguing and remember that they're a family. Stephen tells him that Emma will die in a matter of days or even less. Emma was always sickly, in bed, wanting to be read to. He calls Rebecca vapid, perpetually smiling over nothing, and Anne he calls a tyrant doomed to spinsterhood. What a charming guy. Rebecca suggests calling in a doctor for a second opinion, and he's like, no, we won't be doing that. We're just going to let her die. After all, she has a will for the three of them to split equally when her time finally comes. Suddenly there is a thud and the sound of something breaking upstairs. Stephen goes to investigate, and Emma has passed on. And all he says is, at last, at long last. Nice. He also throws her book away as he leaves the room. He tells his sisters that she's gone, and Rebecca immediately breaks down. Anne goes to comfort her, but Stephen just passes by them and immediately picks up the phone to start making funeral arrangements. Not even going to wait 5 minutes. Anne turns around and gasps. Stephen turns to see what she's looking at, and Emma's shadow is on the wall. Sometime later after the funeral, Rebecca and Anne talk about how lovely the service was, and Stephen has been trying to no avail to get this shadow off of the wall, but it's like burned into it. Nothing is working, and he is really working himself into quite the tizzy over it. Anne is like, just let it alone and come and get your dinner. And no offense to the art department, but it is clearly not a real shadow. It is painted on the wall, and that's fine. It's 70s television. They did their best. Stephen gets a call from the funeral home, and the man has questions about Emma's manner of death. Stephen gets huffy and says, I told you how she died. It was acute dyspepsia with complications. I'm all the verification you need. What are you insinuating? That I killed her because I was tired of reading Bleak House? How dare you? He then sits down and starts bitching about the food, and poor darling Rebecca says she tried to keep it warm for him, and also the neighbor sent over some food. There's cake and pies, and he just walks off, and I hate him. He goes to Anne, who is staring at the shadow. He says it must be an illusion of some kind, but Anne doesn't think so. Stephen's like, I'm just going to paint over it, and she says that you'll try, but you won't be able to. And then she questions him on Emma's death. And by questions him, I mean outright accuses him of killing her. Later, Rebecca brings Stephen some tea while he's working in his study. His coat has paint on it, and she offers to clean it for him and says the paint didn't work, did it? Shadow's still there. Yeah, the shadow is still there. Stephen is planning on selling the house and all the valuables inside. And Rebecca's like, why would you do that? For money, sis. But don't worry, we'll divide it all equally. Rebecca says she doesn't think Emma would want that. And Stephen's like, yeah, well, she's dead. It really doesn't matter what she wants. He's very bitter about Emma. He says that she clung to their father and drove him to death, and then she clung to Stephen. Rebecca says that you're being very cruel, and Stephen's like, no, Emma was cruel. Emma was cruel to all of us. Rebecca then presents him with a bottle of pills she found on the stairs. He's like, where'd you get those? Those are just sedatives. She's like, right, sedatives that you gave Emma to relax you and help you sleep, right? Yeah, that's the ticket. And she tells him that, well, she's sleeping very well these days and he'll feel better once he drinks his tea. And then she leaves him and goes down to Anne. The shadow is still there behind them. Rebecca says she supposes she should feel frightened, but she could never be frightened of Emma. She could do nothing but love her. Anne tries to lead her up to bed, and Rebecca says, physician, heal thyself. Stephen is taking his own medicine. Anne stops her and asks what that is supposed to mean. And Rebecca confesses that she ground up some of those pills and put them in his tea. Since he's been so nervous and irritable lately, all with this serene smile on her face. Anne gets the idea, but Stephen's a dick. So they say they have each other and they'll miss Emma, but not Stephen. And then they laugh and go up to bed. Sometime later, Rebecca is playing the piano and Anne is staring at the wall. The wall which now has both Emma and Stephen's shadows burned into it. Well, Stephen's is an actual shadow, so they don't match, and I don't know why they didn't just paint his silhouette like they did with Emma, because it doesn't match. It's very obvious one is a real shadow and the other isn't. Anyway, while Rebecca continues singing, we hear Stephen reading Great Expectations, doomed to read Charles Dickens to Emma forever. Just what he deserves. The end. As I said up top, this show is very hit and miss. Even if you get a great segment, it's probably surrounded by lackluster ones. But this episode only has 2 segments, and they're both bangers in my opinion. One of the few episodes you can watch from start to finish without fast-forwarding through some weird comedy interlude or something like that. If you're going to watch Night Gallery, watch this one. Or the pilot. The pilot is also very good. This has been another episode of Retro TV Playhouse. Good night. Good night, Gallery.